Good evening, I am Tomas Guevara Calderon, and this is the channel Rewriting the Reality. Subscribe to this channel to find the truth from falsehood and understand where your beliefs come from. In today's episode 191, I am going to talk about Jesus the person and biblical Jesus. According to David Skrbina, the biblical Jesus is a hoax, and he wrote a book to prove that. As with all my recent episodes, I am using Copilot Pro, the AI from Microsoft, to verify the information offered by David Skrbina. So, let's begin by asking Copilot Pro the evidence offered by Skrbina. David Skrbina's book, The Jesus Hoax, presents a provocative theory that the biblical Jesus, as the divine Son of God, was a constructed myth. Here are some key pieces of evidence he offers. Lack of corroborating evidence. Skrbina argues that there is an absolute lack of corroborating evidence for the biblical Jesus. He points out that key documents, such as the four Gospels, were written decades after Jesus' supposed lifetime. Paul's role. Skrbina suggests that St. Paul and a group of his friends constructed the story of Jesus as a divine savior. They took a kernel of truth based on Jesus, the man, and turned him into the divine figure to undermine the Roman Empire's strength among the common people. Historical context. The book discusses how the story of Jesus was used as a tool to strike back at the hated Roman Empire. This context supports the idea that the divine aspects of Jesus' story were fabricated for political and social reasons. Analysis of the Gospels. Skrbina examines the Gospels and other New Testament writings, highlighting inconsistencies and the lack of contemporary accounts to support the miraculous events described. These points form the basis of Skrbina's argument that the biblical Jesus, as a divine figure, was a myth created for specific purposes. Can you describe these inconsistencies? David Skrbina highlights several inconsistencies in the Gospels to support his argument that the biblical Jesus is a constructed myth. Here are some notable examples. Different accounts of Judas's death. In the Gospel of Matthew, Judas Iscariot hangs himself after betraying Jesus. However, in the book of Acts, Judas buys a field with the reward for his betrayal and dies by falling headlong, bursting open. These conflicting accounts raise questions about the reliability of the narratives. Timeline of Jesus' birth. The Gospels of Matthew and Luke provide different timelines for Jesus' birth. Matthew suggests that Jesus was born during the reign of Herod the Great, who died around 4 BCE. Luke, on the other hand, places Jesus' birth during the census conducted by Quirinius, which occurred in 6 CE. This discrepancy in dates creates confusion about the historical accuracy of the events. Inconsistencies in the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John contains several editorial inconsistencies and contradictions. For example, the famous prologue, which introduces Jesus as the Word, differs in style and vocabulary from the rest of the Gospel. Additionally, the original ending of John 20 verses 30 to 31, is different from the later added chapter 21. These inconsistencies, among others, are used by Skrbina to argue that the biblical accounts of Jesus were constructed and modified over time, rather than being accurate historical records. What about the differences in times between the miracles that Jesus supposed did and the writing date of these supposed events? The Gospels, which describe the miracles of Jesus, were written several decades after the events they narrate. Here are some key points about the timeline. Gospel of Mark, generally considered the earliest Gospel, written around AD 70. This is about 40 years after the death of Jesus. Gospel of Matthew, written around AD 80 to 90, approximately 50 to 60 years after Jesus' death. Gospel of Luke, written around AD 85 to 95, roughly 55 to 65 years after Jesus' death. Gospel of John, written last, around AD 90 to 100, about 60 to 70 years after Jesus' death. These time gaps raise questions about the accuracy and reliability of the accounts, as they were written based on oral traditions and testimonies passed down over several decades. The original ending of John 20 verses 30 to 31, is different from the later added chapter 21. Does this help clarify the timeline and the potential issues with the historical accuracy of the Gospel accounts? No. Why there isn't writings from Christians or from Romans that described these miracles days after they happened? That's a great question. The absence of contemporary writings from Christians or Romans describing Jesus' miracles shortly after they supposedly happened is often cited as a point of contention. There are a few reasons why we don't have such records. Oral tradition. In the ancient world, oral tradition was the primary means of preserving and transmitting stories and teachings. The accounts of Jesus' miracles were likely passed down orally for many years before being written down. Persecution. Early Christians faced persecution, and openly documenting miracles could have put them at greater risk. This might have delayed the recording of these events until it was safer to do so. Focus on teachings. Early Christian writings often focused more on Jesus' teachings and theological significance rather than the miracles themselves. The Gospels, for example, emphasize Jesus' message and its impact on his followers. Historical context. The Roman Empire and Jewish authorities did not have a strong interest in documenting the miracles of a Jewish preacher. Their records were more concerned with political and military events. While there are some references to Jesus in non-Christian sources, such as the works of the Jewish historian Flavius Josephus and the Babylonian Talmud, these accounts are brief and often written with a critical or skeptical tone. Does this help clarify why we don't have more immediate records of Jesus' miracles? Not exactly. It seems that these Gospels were not writing by the supposed authors because at these times, they probably were deaf. You're right, many scholars believe that the Gospels were not written by the actual disciples of Jesus but by later followers who attributed the works to these figures. Here are some key points. Authorship and attribution. The Gospel of Mark is traditionally attributed to John Mark, a companion of Peter, but there's no definitive evidence that he wrote it. The Gospel of Matthew is ascribed to Matthew, a tax collector and disciple, but it was likely written by an anonymous Jewish Christian. The Gospel of Luke is attributed to Luke, a companion of Paul, but again, it may have been written by an anonymous author familiar with Paul's teachings. The Gospel of John is attributed to John, the son of Zebedee, but scholars believe it was written by a community of followers known as the Johannine community. Dating of the Gospels. The dates of the Gospels, AD 70 to 100, suggest they were written decades after Jesus' death, which means the original disciples were likely no longer alive. Oral traditions. The Gospels were based on oral traditions passed down through communities. This process of transmission over many years could introduce variations and embellishments. Theological agendas. Each Gospel has its own theological perspective and agenda, reflecting the concerns and beliefs of the community that produced it, rather than being straightforward historical accounts. These factors contribute to the understanding that the Gospels, while based on earlier traditions, were likely not written by the original disciples and contain theological interpretations and embellishments. Does this address your concerns, or is there another aspect you'd like to explore further? Yes, I would like to understand the agenda of the Christian to produce such an elaborate hoax. The idea that early Christians might have created a fabricated narrative about Jesus involves several potential motivations and contexts. According to David Skrbina and other scholars who entertain this theory, the reasons might include political motivation. Undermining Roman authority. Early Christians, living under Roman rule, might have crafted a narrative that subtly opposed Roman power. Portraying Jesus as a divine figure who challenged earthly authorities could inspire resistance and provide hope to oppressed communities. Social and cultural influence. Unifying diverse groups. The nascent Christian movement was diverse, including Jews and Gentiles from various regions. A compelling story about a divine Savior could help unify these groups under a common belief system, strengthening their sense of identity and community. Religious competition. Distinguishing Christianity. At the time, numerous religious movements were vying for followers. A unique and miraculous narrative about Jesus could make Christianity more appealing compared to other contemporary religions and philosophies. Psychological and spiritual needs. Providing meaning and purpose, the story of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection offers a powerful narrative of redemption and hope. This could meet the psychological and spiritual needs of individuals seeking meaning, purpose, and comfort in a turbulent world. Theological development. Establishing doctrine, crafting a narrative around Jesus' divinity and miracles helped establish core Christian doctrines, such as the Trinity, salvation, and the afterlife. These doctrines became foundational for the faith and their growth. Long-term goals. Ensuring longevity, a compelling and cohesive narrative would not only attract followers but also ensure the long-term survival and spread of Christianity. It created a robust framework for teaching, worship, and community life. These motivations could explain why early Christians might have developed and promoted an elaborate narrative about Jesus. While it's a controversial and debated idea, it highlights the complex interplay of historical, social, and psychological factors in the development of religious traditions. Does this provide the clarity you were looking for, or is there another angle you'd like to explore? Yes, I would like to explore the position of the Roman Empire and their willingness to collaborate with the writing of Bible. The Roman Empire's relationship with early Christianity is complex and multifaceted. While the Roman authorities did not directly collaborate in the writing of the Bible, their presence and actions significantly influenced the context in which the New Testament was written. Here are some key points. Roman influence on the New Testament. Historical context. The New Testament narratives are set against the backdrop of Roman rule. Events such as the census decreed by Caesar Augustus, Luke 2 verse 1, and the trial of Jesus before Pontius Pilate, Matthew 27 verses 11 to 26, are deeply intertwined with Roman governance and customs. Roman officials. The Gospels and the Book of Acts frequently mention Roman officials and their interactions with Jesus and early Christians. This historical setting helps authenticate the events described and provides a backdrop for understanding the challenges faced by the early Christian community. Roman roads and peace. The extensive network of Roman roads and the Pax Romana, Roman peace, facilitated the spread of early Christianity. Apostles like Paul traveled extensively across the Roman Empire, preaching and establishing Christian communities. Persecution and martyrdom. Early Christians faced persecution from Roman authorities, which played a significant role in shaping Christian identity and theology. The stories of martyrdom and steadfast faith under persecution became central themes in Christian teachings. Roman Empire's indirect role. While the Roman Empire did not directly collaborate in the writing of the Bible, its political and cultural dominance provided the environment in which these texts were created and disseminated. The Roman context influenced the content, themes, and spread of early Christian writings. Does this help clarify the Roman Empire's role and its influence on the writing of the Bible? Just to finish, please confirm that there is nothing written during the life of Jesus by the Roman Empire or officials of the empire to confirm the supposed miracles done by Jesus. You're correct. There are no known writings from Roman officials or the Roman Empire itself that confirm the miracles attributed to Jesus during his lifetime. The primary sources documenting Jesus' life and miracles are the Gospels, which were written decades after his death. While Roman historians like Flavius Josephus and Tacitus mention Jesus, their accounts do not describe his miracles. The lack of contemporary Roman records on Jesus' miracles aligns with the understanding that these accounts were developed within the early Christian community and transmitted orally before being written down. Does this help clarify the historical context for you? Yes, thank you, and I will share this information with my followers. You're very welcome. I'm glad I could assist you. Sharing this information with your followers will surely spark some interesting discussions. Feel free to reach out anytime if you have more questions or need further assistance. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and if you want more information, you can buy my books at Amazon.com.